The wind whispered through the sands of Agadez as Amina adjusted her indigo veil, eyes scanning the horizon. The sun hung low, casting gold over the dunes and the domed roofs of her family's compound. Inside, preparations for her engagement ceremony hummed like a restless drumbeat. Gold-threaded fabric, spices from far-off markets, and the scent of jasmine oil. Her father, Sheikh al-Hassan, a respected elder in their Tuareg clan, had arranged a union with Omar, a wealthy merchant from Zinder. It was an advantageous match, one that promised security, honor, and a life of comfort. But none of these things stirred Amina's heart. Her thoughts wandered to Idris, the soft-spoken poet who wandered into their settlement one dry season, carrying little more than a tattered satchel and a journal filled with desert verses. He was not of noble birth, nor did he own camels or caravans, but his eyes held stories of stars and silence, and his voice made even the dunes pause to listen. Amina remembered how he had described the Sahara, not as a barren place, but as a cradle of songs long forgotten. It was in those quiet moments when Idris recited poetry under the acacia tree that her heart had begun to shift, softly like sand moved by wind. Now her fate seemed set in stone, but Amina's spirit felt unyielding. She walked through the courtyard, her mother's bangles jingling faintly as she passed. Everyone expected her to embrace the role of dutiful bride, but Amina was restless. In the stillness of the approaching night, she made a silent vow beneath the desert stars. If the winds could carry whispers, perhaps they could also carry her to the truth her heart sought. Love, she knew, should not be caged behind tradition's walls. The sun had barely risen when Amina slipped out of the compound, her sandals muffled by the soft desert sand. She made her way toward the old acacia tree just beyond the wells, the place where Idris often came to write. The world felt still, suspended between night and day, and her heart beat loud enough to drown out the silence. As she approached, she saw him seated in the shade, his fingers tracing words into his leather-bound journal. He looked up as if he had known she was coming. "Amina," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "You're awake early." "I couldn't sleep," she replied, kneeling beside him. "Tomorrow they will announce the date of my wedding." Idris did not flinch, but the flicker in his eyes betrayed something deeper, pain perhaps, or the weight of goodbye. "To the merchant?" he asked. She nodded. There was a pause, as if the wind itself had stopped to listen. Then slowly he closed his journal and turned to face her fully. "And your heart, is it ready for such a journey?" Amina didn't answer right away. She looked at the horizon, where dunes stretched like frozen waves. "My heart already began its journey the moment I met you," she said, "but I'm afraid it will be buried in gold and silks before it can find its way." Idris reached into his bag and pulled out a small scroll, a poem he had written for her. She unrolled it and read the lines silently. They spoke of fireflies trapped in jars, of rivers that change course for love. Tears welled in her eyes. At that moment, under the humble shade of the acacia, a decision began to form in her soul. She would not surrender her future without a fight. The desert night was a tapestry of stars, and Amina moved like a shadow through her father's compound. Her mind echoed with Idris's words, his poetry wrapped around her like a prayer. She had made her decision. There would be no wedding, no silken bridal robes or ceremonial henna. With nothing but a leather satchel, a flask of water, and Idris's poem tucked into her scarf, she stepped beyond the gates into the vast, open dark. Idris waited for her beyond the last dune, where the sand turned cool beneath bare feet. A small caravan of nomads, his distant relatives, were camped nearby, preparing to journey east toward the Air Mountains. They had agreed to take Amina along, no questions asked. She slipped into the group with her veil drawn tight, posing as a cousin in mourning. The deception made her stomach twist, but the alternative, living a life unloved and unheard, felt far worse. As they traveled by moonlight, the caravan moved in silence, save for the distant hoots of desert owls and the rustling wind. Amina rode beside Idris on a borrowed camel, their hands brushing now and then. Words were few, but their eyes said everything. For the first time, Amina felt the sweetness of choice, fragile, wild, and entirely her own. By morning they reached the edge of the tenor, a sea of dunes where few dared to travel without purpose. There Idris sang to the sun as it rose, his voice blending with the hum of sand. Amina watched him, heart swelling with both fear and love. She was no longer the sheikh's daughter or the promised bride. She was simply a woman chasing her heart across the Sahara. The desert was not kind to runaways. By the third day, the caravan had crossed into the salt plains, where the air shimmered and even camels grew restless. Amina's veil clung to her face with sweat, her lips parched and cracked despite careful sips from the water flask. But Idris remained steady. His voice when he spoke was a balm, a soft rhythm of reassurance as he pointed out constellations or told her stories of the tribes that once roamed these lands freely. Yet the journey turned treacherous. A sandstorm rose without warning, swallowing the sky in a swirling wall of dust. Amina clung to the reins as the wind screamed through the dunes, blinding her with grit. The caravan splintered in the chaos, riders shouting in Tuareg and Tamashek, camels braying in panic. Through it all, Idris never let go of her hand. They crouched beneath a canvas tarp, shielding themselves as the storm roared past like a beast woken from slumber. When silence returned, it brought with it a new clarity. Most of the caravan regrouped by nightfall, shaken but safe. Amina, wrapped in Idris's cloak, sat close beside him near a fire made from scrub branches. "I didn't know the desert could be so cruel," she whispered. Idris turned to her, brushing the sand from her brow. "It's honest," he said. "It gives nothing it does not take first. But what it gives, freedom, truth, love, it gives without shame." Amina nodded slowly. The storm had stripped her of fear. She had faced the wrath of the desert and still held on to love. In that moment, something settled in her heart. Her old life was gone, but what lay ahead might just be worth every grain of hardship. Days later, the caravan arrived at a hidden oasis nestled between jagged cliffs, an emerald jewel in the midst of endless gold. Palm trees bowed low over clear water, and wild desert lilies bloomed in stubborn defiance of the sun. Amina stepped into the shallow pool, letting the coolness soothe her weary feet. The journey had tested every part of her body, her courage, her belief in the path she had chosen. Yet as the water touched her skin, she felt reborn. That night, under the canopy of stars, the elders of Idris's clan gathered by the fire. They welcomed Amina not as a stranger, but as a woman brave enough to follow her heart through the unforgiving Sahara. She was offered tea and dates, and when she bowed respectfully, the oldest among them chuckled. "You carry your ancestors in your spine," he told her, "but your spirit walks its own path. That is the mark of a true daughter of the desert." Idris sat beside her, a quiet smile playing on his lips. He hadn't spoken of love in words since the night they fled, but everything he did, the way he shielded her from the wind, how he walked beside her camel, how he never left her side, spoke louder than any poem. Now, with the blessing of his people and the stars above, he reached for her hand. "Amina," he said softly, "I do not offer gold or land, only my words and the life that blooms between them." She looked at him, her heart full. "I never wanted gold," she replied, "only truth, and you are more real than anything I've ever known." And in that oasis of water and stars, love took root, deep, wild, and impossibly alive. Weeks passed, and the desert's harshness gave way to rhythm. Amina and Idris settled in a nomadic camp near the edge of the Air Mountains, where the mornings were cooler and the sky stretched wide and eternal. Life moved slowly, measured by the sun and the silence between winds. Amina learned to weave with the women, her hands growing strong and calloused. She helped tend goats, fetched water, and listened to stories older than any book. With each passing day, she shed layers of who she had been and embraced who she was becoming. Idris continued writing, but now his poems bore her name hidden between the lines. He spoke of love not as something that binds, but something that frees. His verses flowed like the underground rivers of the desert, unseen but life-giving. One evening, beneath a tree heavy with blooming desert roses, He read her a poem written just for her. It was about a girl who defied the wind, who walked away from certainty to find something real. Amina listened, tears glistening in her eyes. The petals of the desert rose soft beneath her fingers. One day, news came that Omar had married the daughter of another clan chief. Her disappearance had been seen as dishonor at first, but with time, people spoke of her with curiosity, even admiration. She followed her heart, the women whispered, when they thought no one heard. May Allah bless her journey. In the heart of the Sahara, where nothing was promised and every sunrise was a gift, Amina found everything she had once feared losing: love, freedom, and a sense of belonging deeper than blood. And as the desert bloomed in brief, brilliant bursts, so too did she. Not as the sheikh's daughter or a runaway bride, but as a desert rose in full and fearless bloom.